Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Liam Douglas here from Liam Photography, and today's video is the first in my new series called Photography 101. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about aperture and how it relates to your photography. Now, I have here one of my lenses for the Fujifilm X mount. This is the new Viltrox 75mm f1.2 Pro lens. And the reason why I'm using this lens is it actually has an aperture ring on it that you can adjust the aperture. Okay, so that's why I figured I'd make a good prop to show you what I'm talking about. Now, I'm sure you're asking me, well, what the heck is aperture and how does it affect my photography? Well, aperture, the best way to explain aperture to somebody who is totally unfamiliar with photography and make it easier to understand is you can think of the aperture of the lens, which is the hole in the center where the light passes through to the sensor. If you take both the caps off, it's that hole in the center. You may be able to tell it's there on the film. I can't tell if you can or not. I can see my camera through it, and maybe you can see a little bit of me through it. I don't know. But anyways, so aperture is the size of the opening in the center of your lens and how it controls how much light gets to the sensor to make the image. Now, it also controls your depth of field, which is how much within your frame of the image you're composing is in sharp focus and how much of it is out of focus. So the aperture on your lens works similar to the pupil in your eye. So as you probably are already aware, if you go outside on a bright sunny day, like today, it's pretty bright outside, you can tell through the curtain behind me, your pupils at the center of your eyes are going to get very small because you're exposed to a massive amount of light, and you don't need all of that light to be able to see comfortably. Now, when the sun is super bright in the summertime, that's when you like to have things like sunglasses to help cut down the amount of light and give your pupils a little bit of a break and your eyes overall a bit of a break from that intense sunlight. Now, when you go indoors, like I am right now, your pupils are going to get bigger. They're going to dilate. And the reason for that is indoors, even when you have the lights on in your home or your office or your studio or wherever, they're nowhere near as bright as the sun. So your pupils are going to open up more so that your eyes can gather more light so that you can see better when you're indoors. The aperture on your lens works the same way, except you control it either with the aperture ring, if you have a lens that has one like this one does, or you're controlling it electronically using a command dial on your camera or a dial on the top. It depends. You know, each camera manufacturer does things a little bit differently. But as you lower the aperture number, so this particular lens, as I said, can go to f1.2. At f1.2, that is when the pupil or the aperture of the lens is at its widest. Kind of like when you go to the eye doctors to get an annual exam and they want to check the backside of your eyes to make sure you have no problem with blood vessels. They give you those drops that make your pupils get really big and makes you sensitive to light for about 4 hours after you leave the eye doctors. You have to wear those wrap around your face, throwaway sunglasses they give you because you're hypersensitive to light. Okay, so at f1.2, you could think of this lens as being a fully dilated pupil. Again, I'm just giving you layman's terms, so it's a little bit easier to understand. A lot of people throw all the technical jargon at you and expect you to just know what it means. I think it's better to give it to a new photographer in layman's terms so it's easier for them to understand what I'm talking about instead of talking down to you with a bunch of technical jargon. So, at f1.2, the opening in this lens is going to be very wide. So it's going to gather a lot of light. So a lens like this is great to use indoors at a wedding or a concert or any other type of indoor event. This lens is going to be great for that because it can open as wide as f1.2. So it's going to be capable of gathering a lot of light when you're in a lower light indoor situation. However, you can still use this lens outdoors on a bright sunny day like today because we can adjust the aperture from f1.2, we can adjust it all the way to f16. And at f16, the hole in the center of the lens for making the image is going to be extremely small. Now I'm going to include a video clip within this video of mine that's going to show you up close what a Sigma lens looks like as you adjust the aperture. Now the aperture is controlled by a set of blades inside the lens, so it's all part of the manufacturing process of the lens. You're going to have aperture blades that'll basically close down kind of like a mechanical pupil. So now, the other thing that your aperture does for you, as I mentioned earlier, is controls the depth of field in your image. So if you're taking a portrait of a single person or a couple, say it's an engagement portrait session, something like that, you're going to want to use a wider aperture to get separation between your subject and the background, because you want the couple or the individual to be the primary focus point of your image. So you want to get lots of separation between them and the stuff that's behind them. So you would use a wider aperture. If you're shooting a couple, you're probably going to want to use like f4. 2.8 might be a little bit too shallow a depth of field. And the reason why I say that is because the more shallow your depth of field, the less area in your image is going to be in focus. So in other words, if you shot this at f1.2 and you got the focus point locked on their eye, it may be just that eye and that part of their face that's in sharp focus, and the rest of them is going to be a bit out of focus. So you're going to have to adjust your aperture accordingly to make their entire face in focus. And if it's a couple, you might have to go to like f4 to get both their faces in focus. Now, that's for portraits. If you're shooting landscapes or architecture, real estate, something like that, then you're going to need less depth of field. You're going to want everything in the image to be in sharp focus. And that's when you're going to use the higher aperture or f-stop numbers on your lens or on your camera body to make that opening in the lens smaller and smaller. So it'll let in less light, because let's say you're shooting outdoors doing landscapes or architecture, and so you got plenty of sunlight, so you don't need this wide open to get light, because it's getting plenty of light. You want to stop it down so it gets less light, and at the same time, that stop down opening is going to make everything in the scene in sharp focus. And I'm going to put some sample images in this video so you can see it for yourself. I'm going to use this lens right here, and I'm going to capture images of the same object at all the different f-stops this lens is capable of, all the ones on this dial. So it'll be several images, but I'm going to use my tripod. I'm going to shoot the same object so you can see how the depth of field changes from f-stop to f-stop. All right, let's go ahead and we'll watch the clip so you can see exactly what the aperture blades look like when they're adjusting, and then I'll share my sample images with you as well.
This is f1.4, f2, f2.8, f4, f5.6, f8, f11, f16.
Our 8 sample images, so I can show you what the changes in aperture, how they affect your image. So this first one was shot at f1.2, and as you can see, the subject, which is my American flag in my front yard, is in sharp focus, and the trees and everything in the background are blurred out. This is called the bokeh, or background blur area. So the flagpole, and the flag mount on our gazebo are all in sharp focus, and everything else is not. Now, as we switch to f2, the flag is still in sharp focus, and I apologize, the wind started blowing as I was shooting these images. And the trees are a little bit more in focus, but still mostly blurred out. And then as we go to f2.8, again, the flagpole, and the mount are in sharp focus. The trees are becoming a little bit clearer. And then at f4, we have the flag in sharp focus. Again, the trees are clearing up a little more. And at f5.6, again, a little bit more clear back here. This is still in focus. This is f8, and at this point, everything is in focus. So even the trees in the background are in focus. So that's going to detract from your subject, which is the flag, if this were a portrait. And then we have f11. The trees are even more in focus now, along with the flag. And then finally f16, where absolutely everything is in sharp focus. So as I mentioned earlier, from f8 to f16 is where you're going to want to be if you're doing landscapes, because it's going to allow everything that's in your scene to be in sharp focus. And that's what you want for landscapes, architecture, real estate photography, stuff like that. The other focal lengths are what you want to use for portraiture, macro, product photography, stuff like that. So the f1.2, I probably wouldn't shoot portraits at it all the time. Most lenses don't perform their very best when they're wide open, as wide as they can go. Usually if you stop down 1 or 2 stops, that ends up being the sweet spot. But as you can see, any of these apertures at the widest point of the lens are really good. I mean, the flag is in very sharp focus. We have good details in the image all the way up to f4, and the trees are still mostly blurred out, but then once you get up to 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16, then you get more of the background in sharp focus as well, which again is going to detract from your subject. So hopefully this helps you out now that you were able to see what the different apertures on this particular lens do and how they affect your images. All right, so hopefully after watching this video, you have a better understanding of what aperture is, what it does, and how it affects your photography. Now, in the next photography one-on-one video, I'm going to be discussing ISO. And then in the third one in this series, we're going to be talking about shutter speed. And you may have heard previously, you've heard other photographers talk about the exposure triangle. Well, your aperture, your ISO, and your shutter speed are what make up your exposure triangle. So we'll be covering those in future videos as well. I hope this video has been informative for you. Please remember to check out my podcast, the Liam Photography Podcast. You can subscribe to it on any of your favorite podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, wherever. You can find it anywhere. Go ahead and subscribe and give it a listen. I have 327 episodes that you can listen to, so quite an extensive back catalog. And also remember to subscribe to the channel, watch this video, watch the other videos I have, comment on them, like them, share them out on social media, hit the little bell icon so you can be notified when new content drops, and I will see you in the next video.